Hey everyone, this is Maya from the Society, and I'm here with a good friend, Branden. How are ya?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, happily. So today, Branden is here to talk to us about his process of conversion, and he's a new Oleh, which is so exciting. And I'd just love to hear some background, like where did you grow up? What religion were you now that you've converted? So yeah, if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. I was actually born in a northern suburb of Houston, Texas. My mom moved down there in the early 1980s in search of work because, unfortunately, the economy wasn't great where she was living at the time, which is Oregon. And so I was born in Houston. My mom actually ended up hating Texas, so she went back to Oregon, which is where her family lived. And that's where I grew up, Eugene, Oregon. It's about 2 hours south of Portland, which is the one city that everybody knows in Oregon. But yeah, Eugene is colloquially known as Berkeley North. It's like a very liberal, hippy-dippy. I smoked marijuana well before I ever drank alcohol. Like, it's that kind of place. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I can actually say that on your podcast, it's but okay. Feel free to edit that out. But I didn't grow up in a religious family. Like, my family was Christian, but it was nominal. It was, we have a Christmas tree, and Christmas is a quote-unquote big deal just because my uncle and his partner would come up from California, and, like, it was a time for everyone to get together. But honestly, I come from a really small family, so every Sunday was a time for us to come together because we always did family dinner at my grandparents' house. Christmas was just like slightly more elevated because it was Christmas. Same thing with Easter. Like, Easter was really just another opportunity to give presents, and like we would get Easter baskets every year. And after my mom and my stepdad got married, like, he came from a really large family, and so like we would do Easter at his grandmother's house, and it was like the whole family convened on grandma's house, and it was cousins and aunts and uncles and all of this stuff. But again, like, the religious element of it was always, I don't even want to say it was secondary. It was kind of like, I guess in his family it was a little bit more important, but for my family, the religious aspect was just never really a big deal. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what was your connection with, like, were you raised in an area that there were Jews? Were you raised in an area that was just, like, secular because it's all hippy-dippy? That's how you explained it.
So that's a really interesting question. To the first point, yes, there were actually, considering the size of my hometown, there was actually a pretty sizable Jewish population. I say that not actually knowing, like, specifically how many, and to be quite honest, at least when I was there was only one synagogue, and it was unaffiliated. So, like, basically, if you were Jewish,
Jewish.
Yeah. Now, so it was unaffiliated then. Now it's affiliated with the Reconstructionist movement. But there used to be, like, decades ago, there was an Orthodox synagogue that had closed because there just wasn't a population to support it. I'm not sure what's happening with that anymore. But there's a very active Hillel chapter at the University of Oregon. So there was a Jewish community, and I went to, this is going to sound maybe bad, I don't know, maybe not bad, but I went to, like, the best public schools in the city, and so I was just constantly around a lot of Jewish students because they also happened to go to the same schools. And everybody, it was a very secular community in general, but it was also, like, a very spiritually oriented community. Like, most people I knew had some type of, like, spiritual practice, whether that be an example, one of my good friends, like, she was born Jewish, but she identified more as, like, Buddhist. So mm-hmm. That was kind of something that she was engaged in. And even friends of mine who were Christian, they went to, like, the really liberal Christian churches. Mm-hmm. So the ones where it's like, oh, you're gay, cool, like, you're still welcome in our church, and that type of thing. So it was really, it was a really progressive community in that sense, and I don't think there was any element of like coercive religious identity. Like there wasn't a palpable, we're the dominant religion in this place. It's kind of everybody was just, you do you, and that's great, for the most part.
When growing up, would you, like thinking back now, like would you identify yourself as like a spiritually inclined person, like, you know, in high school, in college, like all those types of buildable years, I guess?
Absolutely. I think I felt drawn to spiritual religious identity from a young age. I actually went to a Christian camp like the summer, I want to say it was like the summer after my 5th grade year and the summer after I went there for 2 years because a bunch of my friends were going and they were all part of, I don't know if they were specifically part of the church that like sponsored the camp or what, but all of us were going and I was like, summer camp, yay, sounds exciting. So I went for a couple of years and I loved everything about summer camp except the religious aspect. And there was something about it that I really wanted to connect with, but it was just really difficult. And I went through a period of time where like I walked around carrying a Christian Bible because I was like, this is something I really want to connect to.
Wow.
And then I got to like the age of 12, 13. You know, it's that really awkward time in your life where you start questioning a lot of things, you start feeling a lot of things, you start thinking just differently about everything that you've learned. And you know, I started wearing all black and I started hanging out with the punk kids and listening to loud music and like all of those types of things. And it was really the moment when I kind of looked at religion, because at that point it was kind of a big part of my life in the sense of like my mom had married my stepdad and he was much more religious than my family was. And so like we were going to church every week and I was part of the youth group and I took this class through it was like through a local community center, but it was like a focus on the family sponsored curriculum, if you can call it that. I think curriculum is being very generous. As a student of educational theory, I think curriculum is being very generous. But it was one of those things where it was just like, you know, the only way you can ever find salvation in this world is through Jesus. And if you drink alcohol, you're going to hell. If you smoke cigarettes, you're going to hell. If you smoke marijuana, you're absolutely going to hell. If you're gay, like,
too bad.
Sucks to be you. Join one of our like conversion classes. We'll fix that. It was really one of those things. And I think a lot of the elements of my life, not just the fact that I was starting to really, like I had known for a very long time that I was attracted to men. I didn't know exactly what that meant, but when I was confronted with kind of this like tangible reaction to it, I could see that and say, oh, there's something about me that's fundamentally not part of this. And so it's more likely for, even at that age, I could look at that and say, you know what, there's something about this that I'm much more willing to put aside than about what I feel like deeply internally. And I'm not ready to reconcile or like deal with that yet, but I know at least this is not my thing.
Yeah.
So I really made a break, and I told my parents, who were actually surprisingly very cool about the whole thing. I was just like, I don't want to go to church anymore. I'm still exploring. I'm interested in learning more about this stuff, but I just don't think that this is the place for me. And I'm not sure what types of conversations they had among themselves, because I think my stepdad probably had a pretty serious problem with that. But they were just like, okay, as long as you aren't giving up entirely, like, go explore. And so that was really, you know, growing up in Oregon, I was really fortunate. My middle school had a world religions elective class that I took with a group of friends.
School?
Yeah, my middle school. I took it with a group of friends, and all of us came from different backgrounds, but we were all kind of in this weird place where we were like, screw religion, conformity, but we still want to learn about it because it's kind of interesting. like when you're 13 and that's how you are. And so we learned about it, and I kind of found something really interesting we learned about the 5 major world religions, and I found something interesting about each and every one of them. And so I was just like, I kind of want to learn more about these things. So at the time I had a library, like a public library membership, and I would go check out books, read a book, return it, then do these things. But one of my best friends was preparing to become bat mitzvah, and I kind of was like witnessing her journey along that path. Her family was like very secular, very much in the like hippie Eugene scene. But for her, like her Judaism was very important to her. And so I saw it firsthand, and I think that combined with what I had learned in this class and already like what I was kind of familiar with, just from growing up where I did, around the people I did, and seeing just those various different things, I kind of took a larger interest in Judaism than I did in the others. For a while I thought about like Buddhism. I was like, this is really cool and like very esoteric, and I just find it very appealing. But, for something like that, especially at that age, there was no community. There was nothing I could do about it other than like read about it in books and, try to create some semblance of like a personal practice. But I had honestly no idea what that would even look like. And so she, knowing that I was interested and kind of on this path, she was like, if you ever want to come to synagogue with me, like, please, feel free to do so. And so I did. And it was a really wonderful experience. I think for the first time, I really felt like there was a community in which, I was being actively welcomed and encouraged to like participate and learn more and just experience the community with no like pressure. It was kind of like, we hope to see you next week, but also if you don't come back, like, okay, also fine. But being at the age of like 14, I think at the time, rabbis, understandably, are not in the like, okay, let's get you converted. It's kind of like, all right, you're exploring, you're learning, you're young. Yeah. Let's learn a little bit more. And then if you're still interested, then we can talk about it. Yeah. So I started studying with the rabbi. He gave me like a reading list, and he was like, read through some of these things. It was a combination of like Jewish practice, Jewish history, that kind of thing. And then, I went, I lived in Japan for a year in high school, and at least at that time, there was just not a Jewish community there, and that was not the focus of what I was doing there anyway, so that kind of took a back seat. And after I got back from Japan, I was really focused on just graduating high school and getting ready to go off to college. Yeah. And so I didn't really pursue it. I didn't think about it so much. And then when I went to college, it was actually kind of an interesting experience. I had come out my senior year of high school, and then going into college, I was like very excited to start participating in like the queer community, because there was an active community, something that I didn't know about, that I didn't know existed. It was like brand new and kind of exciting and all of these things. And I still felt very much like I had this religious identity to myself, and something that it was something that I still was interested in exploring it to some degree. But at least at the time, I felt like the queer community at my university was just not trying to find a place as a religious person in the queer community, and vice versa was just not going to work. And so I said, listen, religion has never really been that important to me, so I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm going to focus on this other aspect of my life that's still like very new and whatever. So when I was in college, again, it was just not something that I ever really thought about. And it wasn't until I was like getting ready to graduate from college when I really started intensely thinking about like, I'm at this really big transitional moment in my life. I feel like something's kind of missing. Like, what is it? And I started taking an interest in Judaism again. I was like, I feel like there's something there that I haven't really fully explored, and I kind of want to look at again. But then, as fate would have it, I graduated in 2008. Not the best year to graduate from college. I got laid off from my job. So I went to teach English for a year in South Korea. And then when I was there, I got into a relationship and found myself living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Ironically, there is a building named after Golda Meir on the University of Wisconsin and Milwaukee campus. She did spend a significant portion of her life in Milwaukee before becoming Prime Minister of Israel.
Fun fact.
But, you know, when I was there, I had absolutely no knowledge of the Jewish community of Milwaukee or the Jewish history of Milwaukee. And actually, while I was living there, I started going to church again because I was like, I want this to be a part of my life. Like, I just feel like something is missing, and maybe this is the answer to it. So I found like a super liberal church. The head pastor was gay. Like, it was a really beautiful place and a wonderful community, and like I made really wonderful friends there. But the whole time I was there, it just, I don't know, it felt very performative in like this really odd sense. Like, I wanted to be there, but at the same time, I don't know, it wasn't the right fit. Even though in terms of like, at that time, what I understood of what I wanted from a religious community, it like checked all of those boxes. It still just wasn't where I needed to be. So that relationship ended. I found myself living in New York. And when I was in New York, I tried going to church there. I was like, okay, I'm going to find a church community here. It's going to be great. Same issue. And I was like, you know what? I'm living in New York. Lousy with Jews. Jews everywhere. Like, I should try this again. And I don't know, I found CBST, Beit Simchat Torah, which is in Midtown Manhattan, and it's like, I'm not sure if it's the oldest, but it's at least one of the largest LGBT synagogues in the United States. And I went there, and it was just like a whole community of like queer Jews who get together and pray, and like it's like, but it's not just that, it's like this whole community that does explicitly Jewish things. And I was like, wow. First of all, I didn't know such a thing existed.
Right.
But like, this is really amazing. And I kind of, once I started attending services regularly, I was like, this is really where I should be. Like, I feel very much at home here. Like, you know, it's interesting to go, that was 2013. And I think the last time I had really been to a synagogue was probably 2001, 2002. And in that like decade plus between those periods, like I went into services and still knew parts of Lecha Dodi. I still knew parts of Kaddish. I knew parts of these things that I had never really like taken the time to actually learn, but had just kind of absorbed from my experience there. But as soon as I was there, I like noticed these things, and they like really touched a very deep part of who I was. I think a part that I had tried to access in different ways and had just never successfully gotten until I re-entered that space in that kind of like open and like very open way. So I found a congregation in New York and began the formal conversion process, learning through their formal program and learning Aleph Bet, so I could actually, you know, at least sound out Hebrew words. It was not a formal Hebrew class by any means, but I at least learned how to sound out the different characters and stuff. And then my job relocated to Houston. It took me a while to kind of get on my feet there, but I had a recommendation from the rabbi I had studied with in New York for a congregation down there, so I started studying there, working with a rabbi.
Yeah, so I think in the next podcast, we're going to talk about really like your process in the conversion world, because I feel like that's a whole situation from New York to Houston, I feel like that's a new chapter in your life. I feel like that would be an interesting second podcast.
Yeah.
So keep listening in the next one.